Okay, so what is a cloud company? Before I answer this question, I first want to share with you the personal story of mine that inspired me to coin this phrase, cloud company. In 2007, I graduated from university and went straight into the business world. Naturally, I was naive and I didn't know much about how the business world operated. However, what made my entry point into the business world unique was that my father also happened to be my business partner. So now, as I'm sure you can imagine, when your business partner is your father, you have a very unique way of running, growing, and managing your company. And so what happened was that we had almost an unwritten rule that I would manage sales, marketing, and quality, and my father would manage everything else to do in the business. And because of the natural level of trust between us, it meant that I didn't have to get involved with things like setting up an office, talking to our HR manager, or thinking about which servers we needed to buy. I was able to spend 100% of my focus on our revenue-generating operations. As our business grew over the years, however, it did become somewhat inevitable that from time to time, I was going to have to start getting involved with the management side of the business. And whenever this happened, whenever I had to, for instance, speak with our HR manager or our IT manager, I would become very frustrated. I wasn't in the best of moods. This work was not real work. It was not going to grow my company, and for that reason, I absolutely hated doing it. Because of my business naivety and because I'd been so conditioned right from the very beginning to only focus on those operations that grow your business, I thought that the way I worked was completely normal. I thought every entrepreneur in the world works like this. But it was only upon seeing me get frustrated over the years that my colleagues had to tap me on the shoulder and point out that I was being quite naive and I wasn't really living in the real world. Having to get involved with keeping the lights on side of a business was, for all entrepreneurs, just a part and parcel of life. I had just been very lucky. I was a cloud entrepreneur. But now with technology, like me, all entrepreneurs can now focus on the bigger picture. And it is that which inspired me to coin this phrase, cloud company. To truly, however, be able to appreciate the power of a cloud company, we first need to look at cloud computing and ask ourselves the question, why has cloud computing been so successful over the last few years? Well, the cloud is cheaper, it's faster, it's more reliable, and it's more scalable. Another advantage that's frequently mentioned about the cloud is that it enables you to streamline your business and focus on your differentiated value. But what does streamlining your business and focusing on your differentiated value actually mean? These are largely unquantifiable advantages, unlike cost or scalability. And they're rather vague as well. What streamlining my business to me means can mean something completely different to you and your business. And so it's for this reason that I actually believe we're doing a fairly poor job of articulating just how powerful the cloud really is. To truly be able to appreciate the power of the cloud, I believe we need to turn to psychology. In his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman says, making decisions is exhausting. Anyone who has ever configured a laptop online or researched a long trip flight, hotels, activities, restaurants, weather, knows this well. After all the comparing, considering, and choosing, you are exhausted. Science calls this decision fatigue. And so when we now take this into consideration, what Kahneman is basically saying here is that your brain is like a battery, or as Kahneman puts it, mental energy is not just a mere metaphor. And so the more you have to think, and the more decisions you have to make, the more your brain is going to get fatigued, the more that battery is going to get drained, and the more it's going to affect your performance. And I'm sure all of us here can relate to that decision fatigue Kahneman is referring to. But when we now view the cloud through the lens of psychology, the ability to streamline your business now takes on an altogether different meaning. Streamlining your business no longer means being able to just better invest your finances. It also means you can reduce your decision fatigue. And in a world where we are all overloaded with information, the ability to streamline your business and reduce your decision fatigue is truly invaluable, especially for senior decision makers. And this is the real power of the cloud. However, where cloud computing takes you from having to make hundreds of decisions to just a few handful, a cloud company takes you from having to make thousands of decisions to just a few handful. So what is a cloud company? Well, when we use the word cloud, we typically associate it with services like hardware as a service or software as a service. A cloud company works on the same premise as these services. The only difference is that now you have an office and employees being delivered to you remotely via the internet rather than hardware or software. And so whilst you focus on working, collaborating, and communicating with your employees, whilst you focus on just doing this, working with your employee, the cloud service provider takes care of, on your behalf, all of the capital investments, management and maintenance, and running costs for your office and employees. So now, just to give this some context, what does this actually mean? Here is a list of just some of the operations and investments you no longer need to make when you switch to the cloud. So you have things like HR, IT support, accounts, admin, payroll, health and safety, insurance, labor or liability, startup costs, and the list goes on. And this is just a fraction of what the real list would be. So when we now look at this list, I think it should be raising some alarm bells in two respects. The first is, and it should be prompting us to ask two important questions. The first is, of our time, money, energy, and personnel budget, just how much are we investing in these operations? I would, estimate perhaps 30 to 40% of our total budget. And the second question is this: just how much differentiated value are these operations adding to our business? I would argue that the number would probably be close to 0%. And if we were to factor in decision fatigue and distraction, I would then go on to argue that the number would be even less than 0%. It would actually be a negative number. And so, like the cloud computing has enabled us to really streamline our IT departments, and any CTO will really be able to resonate with this, a cloud company now enables you to streamline your entire business. And I'm just going to give you two examples to illustrate this point. So let's take the example of recruitment. In a city like London, how much does it cost to recruit just one employee, especially skilled professionals? Recent studies have shown that the cost goes into several £1,000s. And that's without even taking into consideration factors such as job posting, candidate screening, and background checks. But with the cloud, all the recruitment is done for you. All the talent is already there in the cloud. Your investment in recruitment is absolutely zero. That's a massive change. And let's take another example. Let's look at office space. In a city like London, how much does it cost to house just one employee? Now, if all your team are not involved in face-to-face client engagement, do you really need to house your employees from a city like London, which has amongst the highest real estate expenses in the world? And so we can draw a parallel now between this cloud revolution and the Industrial Revolution. In the mid-19th century, before the national electricity grid, factories had to generate their own power. So for every worker they put on the power supply, it was one worker they did not have working on production. And so when electricity became a utility, this dramatically raised productivity because now everybody could work on production and output. The factories didn't want the power station. They wanted the electricity. And similarly, you want professionalism, management, and efficiency, but you don't necessarily want the support teams or back office departments like HR and IT. They are just a means to an end. And so this cloud revolution that's now taking place is really, truly remarkable because just like electricity is now a utility, you can now have an office and employees like a utility. And that makes things a lot faster and a lot more scalable. I'm sure many entrepreneurs can relate to that frustration of having a really cool and exciting project that you want to get out there, but you have to wait 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months to source an office, set it up, and recruit staff. Well, with the cloud, you can be up and running in a matter of days to weeks in the vast majority of cases. So just think about that. What would having an extra 3 months to sell your service or product do for your business rather than setting up for it? But what is truly remarkable about the cloud is that as quickly as you can scale up, you can just as fast scale down. The cloud is highly elastic. And it is that elasticity that really is going to help you drive your business forward. Just think of this scenario. Imagine you go out there and you hire a senior digital marketer or a senior software developer, and you know that in the back of your mind, if things go wrong, if things go pear-shaped, you can reduce the size of your team with just a few days' notice. This scalability is truly a massive game changer. In the old world, launching a new project meant having to guess capacity. And that is something that is very difficult to do when you don't know what your customer response is going to be. And so invariably, you would end up making a projection that looks something like this. But more often than not, your demand would look something more like this. Now, what this means is that initially, you'd be sitting on a lot of wasted capital and resource. And if your project did then take off, you would be under-provisioned, meaning poor customer service and a loss of sales. You then go into panic mode to somehow get a hold of that extra capacity, and that almost always means you overpaying and overcommitting. And this is why business is so high risk. This is why entrepreneurs have this massive fear of failure. But with the cloud, it's so fast, you no longer have to guess capacity. You instead of laying all that capital resource before knowing how you're going to use it, you can now pay as you consume. And that drastically changes things. It lowers your level of risk, and it takes you from this to this. By trading your capital expense for variable expense, it also really encourages you to push your team to experiment more and innovate. And that is because, firstly, to experiment, you no longer have those heavy startup capital investments to make, so it's so much cheaper to experiment. And the second factor is, even if your experiments fail, you don't have any collateral damage. So by being able to align capacity and demand, you're going to now start getting a truly unbeatable return on investment. And that is a highly unique advantage to have over your competitors. Now, just to recap, these are the 6 main advantages of the cloud. Firstly, you can streamline your business. It's faster. It's highly elastic. You can now hire employees as a service. It reduces your level of risk. The cloud encourages innovation, and you get a better return on investment. Now, there are numerous other advantages of the cloud too, such as economies of scale. The cloud is highly available. It's 24 hours. And you get location independence. However, I'm not going to touch on these advantages today because the objective of my talk today really is more about starting a conversation around, are we thinking enough about what we are thinking about? Are we thinking enough about what we are thinking about? We associate C-level executives, entrepreneurs, and senior decision makers as these crazy people who are always short of time, they're running from meeting to meeting, they're always on their phone, and they're just overloaded. And so we label them as time poor, and we've created this myth or notion that the solution to their problems is that they need more time. I'm sure many of you have heard of the 80-20 rule. It's a rule which a lot of entrepreneurs talk about, that 80% of your profits come from just 20% of your clients. But have we severely limited the application of the Pareto principle by not thinking enough about what we think about? Surely we should also be asking the question, does 80% of your business's differentiated value come from just 20% of what you think about and what you work on? If this is the case, combining both the Pareto principle and Kahneman's decision fatigue, I would propose that the solution to our problems is not to have more time so that we can then go and do more work, but rather we should do less work, but really focus on that work that drives our business forward. If this is the case, I propose that the cloud is the future of work, because the cloud now enables us to achieve more by doing less. Thank you.